Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you today?
Doing well, doing well.
All right.
We've discovered there's been some spying done, illegal type of spying, by our CIA against the American people.
Yep.
And they don't even like Trump. They've been spying on him. Yeah. You know, there's been a few people suspecting that was the case. But there's more information out on this now. There's a title today on Zero Hedge. CIA had foreign allies spy on Trump team, triggering Russia collusion hoax. You mean that was all a hoax? How many pages of news, so-called news, had been printed over the years? And you know, that the election was determined by that. And if you combine that with the fact that if they're willing to do all that to try to prevent it from even getting any votes, what would they do if they found out maybe they didn't count all the votes?
Yeah.
You know, and of course then you're some kind of a kooky conspirator, and you're dismissed, and everybody hates you. Yeah. Except his supporters, except the people that come out. And, you know, I think Trump's turnouts are a little bit bigger than Haley's. Her turnouts have been pretty low.
Yeah, pretty low.
So, but back in 2016, this was going on, but the accusation was, you know, Trump was buddies for the commies from Russia, and it turns out the opposite was true. Of course, I don't know how many times we've mentioned that over the years, because even back then we were rather skeptical of what was going on. But it is more evidence. You know, sometimes I get frustrated, as all of us will, that we know what is very probably the truth, but the truth doesn't get out. So why do we still want to write about it and hear about it? I think it's very important because, you know, I think there's a change that occurs over time. You take the assassination of JFK. Everybody knew Oswald did it. You know, 98% of the people, Oswald did it, shoot him. And they did. They shot him because they were afraid to tell the truth. Yeah. So, but in that case, they kept pursuing it, and people came out, and there was more of investigation, private, honest investigators. And I think it's important to document it, write these books, and they are almost like they can't be government, because the government, they burn books. The government, if they get hold of. But anyway, I think all that investigation is good, and to find information to confirm exactly what we've been thinking. But I think, you know, the Trump people, especially Trump, he's much more realistic, and right now this is going to make the difference, and maybe that's we hope it does for the positive, but it's so often a mixed bag, and you never know what would come of it, even if you can get a little bit more honest in election. But anyway, the CIA has been identified as a participant in this, and they were. The truth is, the USA asked the Five Eyes of Intelligence Alliance, and I found it interesting. Who are these people that are participating in this? The Five Eyes nations that are participating of flipping the information. You know, if they're guilty, well, blame Trump. Five Eyes nations are the U.S., UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And I thought, you know, that sounds like the old British Empire. Are they still around? You know, maybe in security sources they still have a lot to say about it, and someday maybe somebody will say, well, you know, I think the British knew something about some of these assassinations, at least informed of what the assassinations are, because they certainly. How about a recent coup? Wasn't there a coup over there in Ukraine someplace? And I think the British knew about that, and they knew about it all the way back into 1953 when Eisenhower went into Iran. So anyway, there's been information. There's still more to come, and it'll take a long time for everybody to believe it, but the more times they can document that, and it keeps coming out, that they just feel that this is really good documentation of how corrupt the CIA is.
Yeah, I mean, anywhere else, a report like this would have been at the top of the news because it's a massively important story. But in today's day and age, with the mainstream media being what it is, and there's a reason why nobody trusts it at all anymore, it's relegated to what used to be sort of, oh, that's just a blog, but now these are Substacks. And this particular one, there are two that were collaborating on this story, The Public and Racket, and our viewers will know the authors behind it, Michael Shellenberger, Matt Taibbi, and Alex Gutentag. These are the three that were heavily involved in the Twitter files. They're the ones who exposed the fact that the U.S. government was colluding with the social media to censor the American people, which was illegal, would have been illegal for them to do. Well, here's a blockbuster story that came out. CIA had foreign allies spy on Trump team, as you said, Dr. Paul, triggering Russia collusion hoax, say sources. Now, if we go to the next clip from this piece, so essentially what had happened is originally the reporting was originally that a Trump campaign advisor spoke to an Australian former diplomat, and everyone remembers the story. It said something about how we've got some dirt on Hillary or something from the Russians, and that triggered the FBI investigation. Well, that wasn't the case. Multiple credible sources tell Public and Racket, those are the two different Substacks, that the United States intelligence community, including the CIA, illegally mobilized foreign intelligence agencies to target Trump advisors long before the summer of 16. That's when the meeting was supposed to take place, in the summer of 16, which triggered it. Go to the next one now. The official story, as I mentioned, until now had been that the FBI began investigating only after the Australian intelligence official told U.S. officials. So if it originated overseas and it came back to the U.S. intelligence community, well, that would have been different. But in truth, as they found out in the reporting, the U.S. intelligence agency, intelligence community asked the Five Eyes, and you pointed out the former British Empire spook agencies, they asked them, they initiated the contact. They asked them to surveil Trump's associates and share that intel back with the U.S. agencies. Now go back to, and let's look at the face of the person who would most likely spearheaded this. The person on the right, John Brennan. This is the guy behind what you rightly call, Dr. Paul, a coup. The U.S. intelligence community trying to prevent President Trump from becoming President Trump, and this is what they did. It's astonishing.
You know, and I call it surreptitious, secret. It worked for a long time, and it took 100 years to really get in place, but the CIA is there, and it's very strong. And it's different than the average coup and what people think of as a coup. Usually, the coups that we have been involved in, I think quite a few, we don't want to be left out if there's a coup going on. But most of them are short and sweet, and they're smaller countries, and they take some military people in. We have our spies in there. We create friends, and then we throw one government out and bring another one in. This is a lot different because this started a long time ago, and it's stronger than ever because it's philosophic. It was literally attacking Western civilization and the American system, you know, in our Constitution, and they systematically over these many years have undermined it, and therefore we find out, well, how could they get into so many places so quickly? You mean they've snuck in their controlled education? Yeah, people are waking up to that. You've down to the kindergarten that this system is in control. Medicine? Oh, yeah, medicine is not that's old-fashioned. I think medical science. What would they do? They wouldn't even, if you follow science, they probably wouldn't have as many vaccines or something. We need to give vaccines. So what would happen if we didn't have this? So it's incestuous, it's cancerous, it's in everything right now. But at the same time, I keep seeing, and we do see it. When we see something, we tell you, we're seeing bits and pieces in places where people are throwing their hands up and say, you're a bunch of liars, and we're not going to buy this. And it's, I think that's why, even if the truth comes out like this and it doesn't get a lot of attention elsewhere, we're actually, when Taibbi does and a few others, when they bring that out, they're more credible.
Yeah.
If it were out there, in the regular media, people say, well, these are the guys that lied to
us all the time.
Why should we lie? Why should we believe it? But what's I think their technique now is not confronting this, but to ignore it the best they can.
That's what they want to do, yeah. But you remember, in the early days of Trump, and I think it was even in the campaign, when Trump was saying, they're spying on my campaign, and the other side, the Obama people, including the Spooks, they would go on and say, see, this man is clearly paranoid. He's got conspiracy theories about people spying on him. Well, in fact, it turns out they were spying on him, and that's a fact. And we know they've done this in history. We know that the FBI spied on Martin Luther King Jr. and caused him a lot of distress. They spied on Ernest Hemingway and probably caused him to blow his brains out. This is what they do. But they were spying on the campaign, and guess what? It was John Brennan himself who was up to his eyeballs in this. Now, put on the next one. This will tell you the details about it. This is the one after public and racket had been told. Here we go. One more forward if we can. After public and racket, these are two Substacks that printed about it, had been told that President Barack Obama's CIA director, John Brennan, had identified 26 Trump associates for the Five Eyes to target. Their source confirmed that the intelligence community had identified them as people to bump, which means to make contact with or manipulate. They were targets of our own intelligence community and law enforcement, targets for collection and misinformation. So they were the ones doing the misinformation. It really looks to me like John Brennan should be in jail.
Yeah.
This is a coup.
This started out in a more subtle way, but look at how many people are involved. These various countries are involved, and then they get involved really more recently into the media and into social media, and the propaganda machine they have is unbelievable, and it's going to be hard to stop it, because especially we who don't want to stop communications in order to stop all the bad people, I still think that there are ways that the marketplace and honesty, and honesty is the best thing. Get the information, put it out. And maybe it does. Maybe it's not magic, and everybody hears it in one day.
Yeah.
But I think our numbers aren't gigantic. But when we get people joining us, as we have been lately, more people joining us. These people are solid people, and they've thought it through, and they've already clearly understand that there's something terrible going on with our government.
Yes. Well, you remember around the time that the FBI raided Trump's house for the classified documents, it was so dramatic. All of these armed federal agents came in, and at the time, it was pretty much assumed that it was just a show of force to make a point. Well, what a lot of people have been writing about, which is very, very fascinating, is that it wasn't just to try to embarrass Trump. There was actually something more that justified them coming in so hard. Now, put up that same one that we just had up after public and racket. This is very important, and this is something to keep an eye on, in my opinion. Go back one, please. So, unknown details about the FBI's investigation of the Trump campaign and the raw intelligence related to the intelligence community's surveillance of the campaign are in a 10-inch binder that Trump ordered to be declassified at the very end of his term. Now, if you think about that and let that set in, this whole issue about Trump with the classified documents is that he declassified them. They said, no, you can't do that. Well, apparently, one of the items that he declassified to allow the people to see was all the evidence of this coup against him. So that's why they went in there with the guns blazing to get that document. That's what I think happened.
Yeah, yet there's been more manipulation by the Biden group, and they at least Trump was involved in something where he was legally permitted to do. But Biden, got messing around with those records to a greater degree than Trump. But no, but the way it's reported, of course, the average, especially, the progressives and the Democrats are just, determined. Looking for truth doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, this whole thing was about they wanted to bypass the FISA system because they didn't want to leave any fingerprints on this whole thing. So they just called up their spook friends overseas and said, hey, come and surveil this. We need to get some info. We need to get some dirt. And that's why you had this horrible, all the stuff that was produced. But you remember, now John Brennan is the one who who signed off on this letter saying that, the computer, Hunter Biden's computer looks like it was a Russian misinformation operation. Untrue. What was the other letter? The Russia collusion thing. He signed off on that letter. Untrue, untrue, untrue. This guy is really bad news, you know.
Yes.
Well, let's move on. Big news yesterday. Second time is a charm, apparently, if you can put that next one up. The House last night, we'll skip that one for now. We pretty much covered it. House impeaches Mayorkas in historic vote. Alejandro is going to be going bye-bye. Well, probably not, but anyway. In a vote of 214 to 213, Mayorkas is the first cabinet official to be impeached since the 1870s. The Homeland Security Secretary impeached by the U.S. House. What do you think's going on, Dr. Paul?
I think he's a bad guy.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That was the qualification. We'll talk about qualification when we talk about the the list of qualifications for getting jobs in the government. That is scary.
Yes.
But no, this is something else. But I kept thinking that there was another thing came out on the secretary. He was willfully and systematically refused to comply with the law. The evidence is there, but it never got out. Just getting out now, but better late than never.
Yeah.
So that's what they work on. The willingness to take it now.
Yeah.
But you see, the one thing, every once in a while you'll have somebody in politics you'll meet, very rarely, where they will take a position on a policy or join a gang on something and it goes badly, and they'll say, you know what, I was on the wrong side of that. But I would keep thinking I was mocking this and said, what if Mayorkas woke up and said, maybe those guys are right. Maybe we contributed to the destruction of America.
Yeah.
And he said, that's what we were supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting to watch. One of the things in this article, and this is from Zero Hedge that we took on this, one of the things, though, that was interesting to me, and it's just sort of a political thing. If you can put that next one up. I don't know, we talked about this before. So they write, the GOP leaders move to hold the vote before their majority potentially shrinks even further with a closely watched special election Tuesday in New York to replace expelled Republican George Santos. The race is considered a toss-up. Well, we know now that the Democrat won. So this says a lot, I think, about, and this is not related to Mayorkas, but I think it says a lot about the Republican House majority right now, which is they were so obsessed with getting rid of George Santos, who was not PC in their way of being PC, who was a little bit weird, as we all know, but he was a solid Republican vote for Republican things. So they kicked him out because he embarrassed them, and they said they'll hold a new election, and now it's a Democrat. So they're razor-thin majority now because they were wasting so much time kicking out Santos.
Yeah, the election yesterday didn't help any.
No, not at all.
There was a release just yesterday that came about dealing with Mayorkas. And this came from Judicial Watch.
Yeah.
We can trust them.
Yeah.
They found the documents showing Mayorkas personally rejected Secret Service protection for Robert Kennedy.
Wow.
Yeah, this is simply despicable. And actually, my thoughts were even stronger than despicable. That is, it took a federal FAA lawsuit to force out this information speaks volume.
Yeah.
I mean, that is so bad that here he asked for it, and then you have the family history.
Yeah.
I mean, where is there common sense and compassion? What is the purpose of a security force, related to these individuals who have been threatened? And he was turned down, but it was done by him personally.
That's crazy.
He signed the document.
Yeah.
That has to be so bad that once again, he's not going to. Let's say Kennedy, would have gotten shot.
Yeah.
This Mayorkas, do you think he had remorse? Do you think they have feelings? Do they think they care? But sometimes that's exactly, how much remorse would it be if they marched around and killed a few more?
Yeah.
And we live in dangerous times because that generally is, boy, when you read that history of the 60s, about what went on with the Kennedys and Martin Luther King and a few other people, I mean, it was pretty bad. Now they're a little bit more sophisticated. They cancel people, preventing you don't live. And as long as they can keep you from getting any more power, if they can control the media, and they're one step ahead on the media, the social media especially.
Well, even his family history aside, he already had several kooks, and maybe even worse than kooks, trying to assault him on the campaign trail. RFK did. A couple of times there was a guy with a gun who was trying to get in. I was thinking 3 or 4 times something happened. So here, all of this evidence they present and say this guy needs protection. But then when you add in the family history, together with that, it seems like a no-brainer. So this guy says no. And you hate to think that he just wants RFK to get killed. But everything to these people is political. Everything's political. And at the time, RFK was running as a Democrat challenging Biden and was doing well and was getting traction. So who knows? It's hard to think that Mayorkas could be that evil. But you never know. It's Washington, D.C.
But how many times have they argued that the borders are secure?
Yeah, that's right. Up is down, black is white.
They're not a couple thousand, 100,000. Some say millions of people have come in here, and they don't even investigate them. It to me is so disgusting when you when you hear the kids couldn't go to school today because it was taken over and they made a shelter for the illegals, and they do that. Think of the invasion of our hospitals and our schools and everything else. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's so self-defeating, self-destructive. They're sort of masochistic. But really still what bothers me is why don't they wake up? The only reason I can think could it be is they really don't care because that's sort of what they want.
Yeah.
They want to change the system. As a matter of fact, that's well written in authoritarian literature. The fascists did say that you might have remnants of capitalism, but you can't have it.
Yeah.
You got to rid of everything. And in the case that's been going on recently has been getting rid of this social culture, destroying monuments and all this, the system attack. The other thing that really is, it can't be just a coincidence, and that is the attack on families.
Yeah.
When you look at the taking over, the government now really owns the children. They can give permission. The parents can go to prison if they don't agree to have, some horrible surgical procedure without the parents even knowing by the government. That is a bad sign.
Well, speaking of crazy, Dr. Paul, I mean, this makes you pause before getting in a plane. This is some content we noticed on Zero Hedge. More DEI in the sky. Put that one up. It's pretty scary because it talks about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sounds good on the surface, not good in practice, at least the way they're practicing it. And this is a second part of a series, DEI in the sky. We wrote about the outrageous steps that the Federal Aviation Administration took to hire more black air traffic controllers. Nothing against black folks, but it's against the way they tried to promote them. It's pretty outrageous. I think you have got some info on this.
Yeah, when I was in the Air Force and I was a flight surgeon, most people think, well, they're confused. They think we do surgery on the air, but that's just a term. No, we were in charge of the medical conditions of all the pilots or those who were on flying status. And people that were in the control towers, they also had to pass these strict physicals. Mm-hmm. So, that is what's going on right now because somebody came along and to find out how they pick and choose when they're trying to select the best.
Yeah.
We want the best in the Marines, we want the best pilots and all. So I'm going to read a paragraph here because it's monstrous. And this comes from a lawsuit the FAA filed by the Mountain States Legal Foundation that was fighting it. And these are some of the analysis on trying to find the best candidates to go on a flight status. And it says, a candidate could be awarded 15 positive points. the highest possible for any question if they indicated that their lowest grades in high school were in science.
Oh.
We don't want any people to think they're science. That's like, if you know it, we don't want it for doctors either. In contrast, an applicant was awarded only 2 points if they had a pilot's license, and no points were awarded to having a control tower operator rating or having an instrument flight rules experience. In addition, one question on the biographical questionnaire awarded an applicant 10 points, the most available for the question, if the applicant answered they had not been employed for 3 years. If you've been out in the street living in San Francisco, you're right on top of the list. They said, "Oh, we're illegal too." Oh my goodness! Another question awarded 4 to 8 points is the applicant had been employed 5 or more months. You even got more. The longer you were out of work, the more points you got. From the Department of indicate that African Americans had the highest unemployment rate in 25. They just made a statement.
Yeah.
So where were the brains?
Yeah. You don't know anything and you've been on the street? We've got a job for you.
The one thing, even a good pilot, whether they're commercial or whatever, you're taught to use your neck.
Yeah.
You're watching because they don't assume that the controllers have control of everything, but the whole thing is some people think that these individuals are well trained, and they are. But I marveled at the fact that when they challenged Reagan, the controllers went on strike, and there were enough people, and the transition wasn't at all bad when they got rid of a union, and all of a sudden they brought people in. But I'll bet you any money Reagan didn't have this list of stuff go through. You'd have never replaced as many people as they put in, and that turned out to be a positive.
Of course, in the downside of it, and it's absolutely terrible, is that African Americans that are qualified, people will now look askance at, and that's outrageous because I'm sure there are plenty. But it's not just African Americans. Just do that next clip. Matt Walsh is kind of a right-wing gadfly, but sometimes he has some interesting points. He did some research into this, and he's talking. This is a long thread on Twitter. I'll just read this one. So it's not just African Americans. Matt Walsh writes, a second source, a pilot I've confirmed works at Delta, tells me that Delta has recently promoted a trans-identifying pilot who repeatedly received bad reviews from the captains. According to the source, this pilot would likely not have survived probation if he weren't trans. And here's the quote. We recently had a transgender pilot repeatedly receive negative reviews during his first-year probationary period from captains he flew with regarding attitude, CRM, and judgment. Yet the chief pilot's office was unwilling to address the issue. Had this not been a transgender pilot, the individual would likely have not successfully completed their probationary period. Coincidentally, the CPO has a management pilot on staff who recently transitioned, who was able to weigh in on these matters. So they're more interested in having a trans pilot on the plane than having a pilot who can fly the plane.
Yeah, and that's the big deal. And their Bible for picking and choosing are the rules of DEI.
Yeah.
And when I think of that, that's totally insane. Because if you want to find some system and some motivation that would challenge libertarianism, it would be this. This is exactly opposite of libertarianism. They say, well, but libertarians don't care about diversity. We have to provide that. That is not true. They present conformity, and it can, it promotes, bad judgment. And the same way with equity. Well, I think libertarians are the one who really know about equal justice.
Yeah. But
equity is the equal distribution. Well, don't ever fire them because they deserve the money too. And then inclusion. Can you think of people who are less inclusive than libertarians? They're open-minded. Yeah, maybe they wouldn't invite a criminal that's been out in the street and just came here and had a machine gun. Maybe he wasn't going to include him and say, "Oh, come on in." But they're doing that now. They're bringing in people to show their loyalty to the DEI. Some owners are saying we have to show that we support it. Just come in. We'll take in some people like that, and that's not going to work out well.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. People will stop flying if they hear more of this. But anyway, I'm just going to close out and thank everyone for viewing the show today. We appreciate you watching the show. We had a good live audience. Please hit like. Please hit follow. Follow our channel and help us spread the message around. We appreciate it. Over to you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. And I too want to express my deep appreciation for all our viewers tuning in on a regular basis. And we feel pleased that in the last several weeks we have garnered a lot more supporters, people wanting to get information. And numbers are important, but that's not the whole goal. It's getting the quality people in who will pass the message along and has an understanding, because people will go along with leadership. The problem is some of the bad guys want to be the leader too, and then they get the arm of the government and the arm of the bureaucrats and the propagandists in the media, and the battle becomes very difficult, and that's why we're up against a big battle. But we have something so much more powerful than all that, because we have truth on our side, because even when the truth hurts and it points out, the pros and cons of what everybody does, seeking truth is eventually the most powerful tool that we can have, and that's why we will pursue this, and that will why we will sound like we're taking controversial positions, but they're only controversial because some people still don't quite understand what non-intervention means. Non-intervention means leave us alone. Government doesn't have a right to bug us. They don't have a right to close off our machine because we're critical of something the government does. So I think this is so important for people to understand this, and I cannot understand why we don't do a better job, and I keep trying my best. That why is it that we have such a wonderful philosophy, one of non-intervention, that I am absolutely convinced if you're looking for peace and prosperity, it's the best road to take. And that's why we're going to stick with our efforts to promote the cause of peace and promote the independence, peace and prosperity. And I want to thank you once again for tuning in today, and come back soon.